Okay, guys, looks like we're recording. I'm going to go over this with you. I'm going to share, instead of sharing the, instead of sharing this paper, I'm actually going to be sharing my notebook. I have a piece of notebook paper pulled up on my smartboard here. And I'm going to show you how I took those notes. Okay. Up. Cool. Let me pull up the chat because I want to make sure that I'm not missing anybody here. Does anyone need me to go back and explain what we're starting? Someone says no, so that's good. Okay. At times I'll be stopping and you can see me messing with my computer. It's just me having to move around my chat and stuff like that so that I can read what's behind it and stuff. Oh. See, glad I tried to do that. I need to plug in my smartboard. And I'm going to recalibrate it real quick so that my writing is not sloppy. Wow, so it's not as sloppy as it normally, or it'll still be sloppy, but it'll be less sloppy if my pen writes where I think it's going to write. So what we're going to do here, we're going to start taking these notes on notebook paper just to show you how I would do it or how it should be done. And the first term is natural law. But before we do that, we need to go up and we need to say 3.2. Okay? And this is philosophy in the age of reason. And I got that from the textbook. This is the textbook section that we're going to use for these notes. If your notes don't say this, that's fine, as long as we know that it's 3.2. But if we want to have great notes, it'll say philosophy in the age of reason. And the first term we'll use, first term we've got here is natural law. Okay. And I want to read this to you guys. I'm going to grab this right from the textbook. Let me move this algebra book really quick. The scientific revolution of the 15 to 1600s had transformed the way people looked at the world. In the 1700s, scientists expanded European knowledge. Scientific successes convinced educated Europeans of the power of human reason. Natural law, or rules discoverable by reason, govern scientific forces like gravity and magnetism. Why not then use the natural law to better understand social, economic, and political problems? Using the methods of science, reformers set out to study human behaviors and solve the problems of society. This way, the scientific revolution led to another revolution in thinking, known as the Enlightenment. Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, was one of the first to describe this era with the word enlightenment. Despite Kant's skepticism about the power of reason, he was enthusiastic about the Enlightenment and believed that natural law could help explain aspects of humanity. Okay. Let's go back and look at natural law. This is a term that was in that paragraph there. Natural law, I have notes here so I don't have to keep turning around. Natural law is rules discoverable by using reason they describe scientific forces. I don't really like that terminology as a science teacher, but from the history perspective, that's fine. Scientific forces like, I just said life twice. Light, gravity, and magnetism. But really, they describe nature, just like the Isaac Newton stuff that we've been talking about in science. Okay, natural law, it's the same thing as scientific law. Okay, that we talked about in science class. This is the same thing. In the 17th century, there were two English thinkers named Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. And they set forth some new ideas about how reason could lead us to better society, or how we could use reason to better understand our society. Both of these guys, they lived through the English Civil War. I want to say that again, the English Civil War. That's not the American Civil War that you've already learned about before. The English Civil War. They came out with two very different ideas, although there was some overlap, two very different ideas about human nature and the role of government, or what government's job is. Part of the reason why they came up with totally different ideas about it is they were different ages during the English Civil War. Thomas Hobbes was an older man. He was a grown adult, an established person during the English Civil War. So it was hard on him, and he experienced how rough it was for people his age. John Locke was younger at the time, quite a bit younger. He came around later, and you should note Mr. Wayne is copying back my notes into the chat. It might be a little more readable. It's very helpful. Okay. But yeah, Locke was younger, so he experienced something different. Yeah, I started to.
I went ahead and put twice.
Okay. I started to. We're going to pick a different color. Let's use yellow. Can we see yellow? No, that's gross. Yeah, that's pretty gross. Let's use this light green. Hobbes. I think it's probably more visible on your screen than it is up here on the bright smart board of the sunlight. So that's fine. Hobbes. Okay. Well, it says already in your notes that Hobbes he wrote that people were naturally cruel and greedy and needed a powerful government to keep them safe. And for some reason, a question mark. But I'm going to read to you about these guys. Thomas Hobbes outlined his ideas in a work called Leviathan. In this book, he argued that people were naturally cruel, greedy, and selfish. If not strictly controlled, they would fight, rob, and oppress one another. They would boss each other around. Okay? Life in this, quote, state of nature, without laws or other control, would be, quote, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes thought that without a government, life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. We'll talk about this in a second. Okay. To escape that brutish life, said Hobbes, people entered into a social contract, an agreement where they gave up their freedom for an organized society. We'll come back to that. But it's enough to say that Hobbes thought that people are naturally cruel, greedy, or selfish, and they need a powerful government, a very powerful government. They need a powerful government to keep them safe. In the chat, I want to hear you guys' opinion. Say yes or no in the chat if you think that we need a powerful government to keep us safe. Do we need a very powerful government to keep us safe? Let's take a look at that in the chat here. want to see what you guys think. Maya says no. Logan says no. Summer thinks we need a powerful government. Ryan says no. We are going to circle back to this social contract idea because this is a big deal. The idea of the social contract is maybe the whole reason we have a history class is so that we can look at that closely and understand that. Look at Mr. Wayne. He's such a gangster. Doesn't really work when you turn your head. Okay, so I'm going to leave this up here for a little bit of time. I'm actually going to see if I can squeeze lock in underneath here. Yeah, I can do that. No, I'm not going to. 30 seconds to copy this down because I'm going to erase it. I need to. Cool. So now it's in the thing, so I can just go ahead and clear it. It's in the chat. If you need it. Let me close this, scroll down a little, and this gives me room to. Now I can do 3 terms on one line here. Okay. Locke advocates natural rights. John Locke had a better view of human nature. He thought that people were basically reasonable and moral. Furthermore, he thought that people had certain natural rights, or rights that belonged to all humans from birth. Okay. This is a key point when we talk about John Locke. He tells us that people are deserving of, that they have natural rights. Locke, natural rights. There's a pretty funny joke about this in college that had to do with natural rights. Okay, and the natural rights, I'm going to highlight these in a different color because they're so important. The natural rights that John Locke believed that everyone had was a right to life, liberty, and property. And we're going to talk about these in detail here in the next term. We'll talk about the social contract. This is really important. Locke believed that people could govern themselves, and that when we do govern ourselves, that it's to protect our life, liberty, and property. In his publication, Two Treatises of Government, Locke argued that people formed governments to protect their natural rights. The best kind of government had limited power and was accepted by all citizens. So unlike Hobbes, Locke rejected absolute power like that. England during this time experienced a shift in political power known as the Glorious Revolution. Hobbes thought that overthrowing the king, as they had done in England, it's a long story, we're not getting into the English Civil War. Hobbes thought that the act of overthrowing the powerful government caused chaos and murder in England, where Locke thought that what caused the murder and chaos was having an unfair king to begin with. Okay, so this is where they kind of got 2 totally different ideas about this, right? If you believe that law and order is necessary to keep from having buildings burning down all over the cities, then you're probably with Thomas Hobbes on this. If you believe that having a fair and just government in the first place is what's key to keeping the cities from burning down, then you might be with Locke on this. So we can see how these ideas sort of reverberate into today. I mean, there are protests going on right now in America, in American cities, And these are the things we're talking about. This is the same argument, and it goes back hundreds of years. Okay? All the way back to the old glorious revolution in England, if not farther. Locke says that a government has an obligation to the people it governs. It is obligated to protect these natural rights, and if it doesn't protect those natural rights, then it should be overthrown. That idea was quite seditious. It was quite contradictory to the authorities of its time. Here we're going to get into the social contract. Okay. Now, Hobbes came up with the idea of the social contract, but Locke sort of adjusted it. Okay. Hobbes thought that we needed an absolute government to protect each other, to protect ourselves. Locke thought we needed a government to do that, but that it should be as limited as possible. But in both cases, they believe in the social contract, which is that people give up some, if not all, social contract. People give up some of their liberty, or in the case of Hobbes, all. Let's see, liberty, freedom, same thing in this case. People give up some of their freedom to protect, no, not to protect, to have an organized society. What I did here. Organized society. Let's spell society for a second here. Okay. So Hobbes believed that we give up all of our freedom so that it's not just murder in the streets. Locke says we give up some of our freedom to make sure that we have life, liberty, and property. In other words, we give up our freedom to protect these natural rights. People give up some of their freedom to have natural rights. Okay. Let's think about this. Without a social contract, if everyone were perfectly free to do whatever they wanted without any consequences, how would our life not be protected? What thing could people do if not for the social contract? What's something people could do if not for the social contract? Somebody tell me in the chat here. What is something people could do? If people were free to do anything they wanted, what's something they could do that they can't do now? I will call on someone and expect an answer. Maya says, beat them. And Maya says that without the social contract, if Mr. Wayne wanted me to bring him a breakfast sandwich every day and I didn't do it, he could just hit me. Okay? That without the social contract, that would be acceptable. That would be something that might happen. Okay? He might even kill me, right? If he hit me hard enough, he might even kill me. So without the social contract, we wouldn't have our life protected. Okay? What's some way that the social contract protects our liberty? If someone took my liberty, what would that mean? What's that mean if someone took my liberty? Someone besides mine, answer me here. No insurance. So my liberty to have insurance, you mean? So if someone wanted to take my liberty, that would mean that they're allowed to boss me around. Okay? So having no liberty means that a government can boss me around, or someone else can boss me around. If we don't have a social contract to protect our natural rights, then maybe our employer can say, hey, you have to work for no pay. Okay? That's taking my liberty. That's making me a slave. Okay? The social contract protects us from being enslaved. Okay? Or maybe it protects us from having a government that bosses us around and tells us to work for very, very little money. And you know, like the Chinese government, for example, kind of rough on its people. Their social contract is a little bent, if not broken, because maybe people there aren't paid as they should be. How does the social contract protect my property? If people were free to do whatever they want, what would happen to my truck outside in the parking lot right now? They might just show up and just yank my stuff, right? They just steal it. Yeah, he just come by and grab it, right? Or maybe they would destroy it. So the social contract protects our life, liberty, and property. According to Hobbes, if we want to do that, we need a government that absolutely keeps people in fear. According to Hobbes, the social contract depends on you being afraid of the guys with guns, okay? Or the guys with swords or whatever at his time that he thought. Now, according to John Locke, we need a very limited government that's only strong enough to make sure that our natural rights are protected. According to Thomas Hobbes, we need one that dominates us and saves us from one another. It's kind of shades of gray kind of thing. Okay. I actually do need that back. Otherwise, I won't be able to set my pen down. Okay. So that is the social contract. These ideas got things started, okay? Later, people started to take these sorts of ideas and expand on them, okay? And keep in mind, this Locke and this Hobbes guy, these guys are Englishmen. But this next group of people are actually in France. And they're called, color here. What's a very Frenchy color? Let's go with pink. They're called les philosophes, or philosophes. Oh man, I'm just starting with that. I get that one up. Philosophes. This is French. It means philosophers, okay? In the 1700s, there was a flowering of Enlightenment thought. This was when a group of Enlightenment thinkers in France applied the methods of science to understand and improve society. They believed that the use of reason could lead to reforms of government, law, and society. These thinkers were called philosophes, which means philosophers in French. Okay? Their ideas soon spread beyond France and even beyond Europe. So they're still spreading around the world. There are places in the world where these ideas are still just now being embraced. But I'm going to give you guys a different definition, okay? It's a little simpler. Philosophe is basically just a nice fancy French term for Enlightenment thinkers. And this kind of includes these Englishmen up here, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. But it is especially talking about the ones that came later. The French ones, the French guys that we're going to talk about. So the philosophes were the French Enlightenment thinkers, but maybe even all Enlightenment thinkers altogether. Okay, and there are a few of them here that we're going to talk about. So when I ask you name on the test, I say name a philosophe. If you tell me Locke, I'm not going to say you're wrong. Okay, but if you say Voltaire, you're going to be way right. That's the rightest answer. Okay. All right. The first of these is Montesquieu. He was born Charles-Louis de Secondat, Baron de Montesquieu, or Monty, if you're lazy. An early and influential thinker was Montesquieu. He studied the governments of Europe, from Italy to England. He read about ancient and medieval Europe and learned about Chinese and Native American cultures. His sharp criticism of absolute rule would open doors for later debate. So he was one of the first people to go against and attack the idea of an all-powerful king. He published his work, The Spirit of the Laws, where he discussed governments throughout history. He thought the best way to protect liberty, again, liberty here, I'm pointing, you might not see my camera, but it's up here with our natural rights. The best way to protect liberty was to divide the powers of government into three parts. Okay? These three parts are the three branches of government. So let me see if I can write. Good old Montesquieu. Montesquieu. Not kidding. That's literally how you spell his ridiculous name. But he was a cool guy. He came up with the three branches of government. I'm going to go ahead and list those here because we need to know them anyway. And you should already know these based on earlier classes that you took, but maybe not. The executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches. Now, we'll get into that in a second. Now, having these three branches means that our governments have to argue with themselves. That we can't just have an executive go and decide what the laws are. That our executive doesn't hold trial and tell people when they're guilty of violating those laws in court, and also work to be the police. So we have three separate jobs of government, and it's broken into three parts. We have an executive who enforces the laws. We have a legislative branch that creates the laws. We have the judicial branch that determines whether or not the laws are being followed or what the laws mean. So we break government into three parts, and by doing this, this provides for checks and balances. And this is actually really relevant today because we still use these ideas. We still have this idea of checks and balances, and it's coming soon, okay? Right now in the Senate, like as I speak, right now in the American Senate, they're debating on, they're not debating, they are questioning a Supreme Court nominee, someone that our executive wanted to be a judge, okay? Our legislative branch is determining whether or not they should be. And they're asking her questions. And by doing this, we are having checks and balances. We have a government that says, well, the executive gets to decide who the judge is going to be, but the legislative branch gets to determine, is this a good idea? Should we accept this? Okay. And if they say no, then the executive has to start over. And whoever they decide on, that forms our judicial branch. It forms our Supreme Court justice. Okay. This is relevant because in the future, in the near future, we expect the possibility that we need the judicial branch to settle an argument between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Our president and our Congress might have a difference of opinion in the coming time. They already have a difference of opinion, but it might escalate to the point where we need the judicial branch to weigh in. Whichever side the judicial branch decides on, that's might be what decides our election very, very soon, in the next 3 weeks. Okay, 4 weeks. 4 weeks. Well, it's going to take a week to know what the votes say. But yeah, so this stuff's still relevant today, and Montesquieu got us started. He separated out government into three branches, and when we made America, we took that idea and we made it part of what we do. Okay, so that's Montesquieu. All right, I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds to copy what's on the board before I erase it here. I'm told they all are in the chat if you need them. Mr. Wayne's being pretty helpful. Just like I was Monday morning, first thing. That was useless Monday morning. It happens. Usually pretty good, but Monday morning I was not. Okay, I'm going to clear this off. We're going to talk about Voltaire. Voltaire is my favorite. He's my favorite of the philosophes, and he's probably the most famous of the philosophes.
He's not a vampire, right?
Voltaire was a vampire. No, he was not a vampire. Voltaire was born, check out this name. It's the toughest sounding name ever. Listen to this. Voltaire was born Francois-Marie Arouet. Literally part of his name was Marie. But he was known as Voltaire. He was a passionate poet, historian, essayist, and philosopher. He wrote with cutting sarcasm and sharp wit. It means he was very sarcastic and funny and mean. Voltaire was sent to the prison twice due to his criticism of French authorities, and was eventually exiled from Paris. When he was able to return, he wrote about political and religious freedom. He spent his life fighting enemies of freedom like ignorance, superstition, and intolerance. Okay. Question here is, what did Voltaire attack in his writing? So we'll take a look here. Voltaire was probably the most famous of the philosophes. Okay. He took the name Voltaire. My trade, he said, is to say what I think, and he did so. He used his fighting wit as a weapon to expose the abuses of the powerful in his day. He targeted corrupt officials and idle aristocrats, that is, lazy, wealthy people. He really went after it, okay? Voltaire, at his time, was very big on social commentary. He was he was witty and mean and funny, and he had a popular following, okay? You guys probably know some rappers, okay, or some musicians, or some TikTokers or YouTubers or somebody who's probably got an opinion about the social causes of the day. And you might notice that they have some really pretty savage burns, that they really come after people and roast them really, really well on social media. Okay. This is Voltaire. Okay. Voltaire roasted people bad. And the people he roasted were the corrupt officials and idle aristocrats. Voltaire. Okay, so he was mean to the people he thought were not deserving of their authority. We still see this today, guys. I hope you guys can think of an example of someone who's pretty awful. What are you typing over here? I don't know anyone like Francois-Marie Arouet. Yeah. I mean, I have been accused of this sort of style of argument on social media. Actually, some of my close friends say that I probably go a little far with it, that I go a little strong with it. But this sort of commentary, there's actually a name for this. You don't have to write this down, but it's useful to know in the world. It's called polemics. And that means like asking very pointed and annoying questions, or pointing out that someone's being ridiculous in the point they're trying to make. I might do some of that from time to time. I might have been in trouble at my job for doing that from time to time. I might have been in trouble with loved ones for doing that from time to time. But when I see something unfair or unjust, I have a hard time keeping my mouth shut. And that's what Voltaire did. I'm not saying I'm at all like Voltaire, because Voltaire is way more awesome, or was way more awesome than I will ever be. But I mean, if I could be like Voltaire, I'd consider that a success. I probably wouldn't have any loved ones around. They'd probably all leave me behind because they're tired of my angriness or whatever. But the guy did good work. He went after wrong people, and he did it well. Okay. Monsieur Arouet was not the last of the philosophes, though. Voltaire's outspoken attacks offended the French government and the Catholic Church. Okay, he was, even as he saw his books outlawed and burned, he continued to defend the principles of freedom of speech. So he really went after trying to protect people's freedom. Again, all of these people are arguing that everyone deserves freedom. Everyone. Keep that in mind because there's some people they're not mentioning here. Next, we come to this guy with a funny sounding name. Okay. When you read it, you might think his name is Diderot. Okay.
You're telling me that Errolot didn't have a funny sounding name?
Alouet.
Owlet.
Alouet. Francois-Marie Alouet.
I'm sorry, you thinking of a
Oh.
baguette?
Right. Voltaire's kind of a funny name. But this Diderot, his name is actually Denis Diderot or Diderot. Okay. Diderot. Okay. Diderot. Oui, again. His name was Diderot. He came up with this cool idea where he would take the ideas of people like Voltaire and Montesquieu and others, and he would challenge the authorities of the day. But not only did he do that, but he took other ideas and put them all together. Okay. He worked for years to produce a set of books called L'Encyclopédie, the first encyclopedia. Okay. He created the first encyclopedia. So basically, he took all of the ideas that went against the authorities of his day, and he put them together in the first Wikipedia. Okay? The first Wikipedia, except for it was written on paper. Okay? Which was critical. It means it went against of the ruling class. His purpose was to, quote, change the general way of thinking by explaining ideas like government, philosophy, and religion. The encyclopedia included articles by leading thinkers of the day, like Montesquieu and Voltaire. In these articles, the philosophe denounced slavery, praised freedom of expression, and urged education for all. They attacked the idea of the divine right of kings and traditional religion. Critics raised an outcry. The French government argued that L'Encyclopédie, this book, was an attack on public morals, and the Roman Catholic Church threatened to excommunicate anyone who bought or read it. Despite these efforts, more than 4,000 copies were printed in this time frame. When translated into other languages, the encyclopedia, it spread the Enlightenment ideas. It spread the Enlightenment. Now, you might think 4,000 copies is not a lot of copies of a book. But in today's age, we know about books that are mass produced. They're made in factories. This was literally printed in a factory and bound in a factory by lots of very big and complicated machines. And because of that, we're used to books being, well, common and disposable. I literally rescued these science books from the dumpster. They were headed to the dumpster, and I said, no, we can use those. We should never throw out something like this. But in Diderot's day, books were sort of rare. And so 4,000 of them was a bunch. And that was enough to get these ideas to spread throughout Europe and then later into America and into parts of Asia and things like that. These ideas spread because of Diderot's encyclopedia. Okay. They're what brought Montesquieu to us. Okay. When Thomas Jefferson was reading and studying at college to try to understand how to form a government, he probably read from this encyclopedia. He probably didn't read at first anyway. He probably didn't read directly from Montesquieu. He probably read it in this encyclopedia, which led him to read Montesquieu. Doesn't matter. Okay, now we're going to talk about another guy. He's sort of controversial. His name was another cool sounding French name. It's funny how all these philosophes have French sounding names. I wonder why that is. in the chat, can you guys tell me why these guys had Frenchy sounding names? Come on. Why would all these philosophes have French sounding names?
Because they're all très pretentious.
Mr. Wayne says because they're so pretentious. They have these French sounding names because they're Frenchmen. They're French people. But yeah, to make them, but their names are French because they're from France. A lot of these guys, especially the ones we label philosophes, they were French. Okay, so here's another one. This guy's name was Monsieur Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Or we just say Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, I'll just read to you here. He believed that people in their natural state were basically good. He thought that this natural innocence was corrupted by the evils of society, like the unequal distribution of property. Rousseau thought that property should be distributed equally. This is a very controversial idea, and it's one that gets pushed back on quite a lot, especially in today's politics. But it was an early example of socialism or communism, although he wouldn't have called it that. He just thought that it was unfair, that some people are super wealthy and some are very poor. He didn't really get into it that much with labels. Many reformers and revolutionaries later adopted this view, okay? People like Karl Marx, who we'll learn about later in this school year. People like Robert Owen. I want to say Robert Owen, am I right? Owen was the guy's name. But Marx and Engels, Owen, these guys came up, they took these ideas and expanded on it. Rousseau set forth his ideas about government in a book called The Social Contract. He thought society placed too many limitations on people's behavior. He believed that some controls were necessary, but they should be minimal. Only governments that had been freely elected should impose these controls. Rousseau put his faith in the, quote, general will, or the best conscience of the people. He thought that the good of the community should be placed above, the good of the community should be placed above individual interests. Okay. He placed his faith in general will. And that's not a person. Before Mr. Wayne makes a funny joke about general will. In French, it would be General Guillaume. Guillaume is French for William. Okay, general will, which is the good of the community. The good of all is more important than the good of individuals. So here we see this fight, this sort of argument, right? And hopefully, by this time in your lives, you can see that our own society still struggles with this. Okay? What is more important? Is it more important that each individual have as much freedom as possible? Or is it more important that the community have the most freedom possible? It's this push and shove, this argument over the social contract and where it begins and ends. How much of our freedoms do we need to give up for how much protection? It's this constant back and forth, this back and forth. And that's where politics lives. It lives in this back and forth of the social contract. In other words, was Hobbes more right that we need a powerful government that dominates us and protects us from each other? Or was Locke more right that our government should be as limited as possible and that if it doesn't protect our individual interests, we should throw it out? It's this push and shove, this back and forth. And Republicans and Democrats in America, they fight over these things issue by issue. In some cases, Republicans believe that we should have a smaller government that tells us less about what to do. And in other cases, Democrats believe we should have a smaller government that tells us what to do even less. Okay? And on other times, the Republicans think we need a larger government that is more intrusive and more interested in scaring us into behaving. And in other cases, Democrats think that we need a government that's more powerful and tells us more what to do to protect our rights. Okay. So it's this back and forth, and we see this play out in politics all the time. And that is maybe, this idea is maybe the whole reason we study this, is so that when you guys go to vote, because you guys will probably be able to vote, I hope you do vote, in the next presidential election, not the one coming up in a few weeks, but the one after that, you guys will be old enough, and hopefully these lessons will enter into your mind. And you'll think, what kind of a president do I want? What kind of a congressman do I want? Do I want one who believes that we need a stronger government that dominates us in this area? Or do we want one that wants a stronger government that dominates us in this area? Or a weaker government? Or a government that just protects our natural rights? And what is the best government? These are the relevant questions. And that's where this comes in. Okay. We are going to move off of the male philosophe, and we're going to start talking about the female philosophe and end with Adam Smith. We have 2 more terms, but I'm going to let you guys copy this down as soon as I'll give you guys 30 seconds, and I'll clear this and we'll move on. Taking a quick sip of my drinking.
Let's not be campaigning in the comment section.
We're not going to campaign in the chat here, guys. I appreciate the enthusiasm. I think that a healthy dialogue on this, that an argument over this is a good thing. I just think there's a time and a place for it, and we couldn't sit in a classroom. I shouldn't stand up here and say, you know, Trump is the greatest, and you guys should all vote for him, or I shouldn't say Biden is awesome and he deserves your vote. We shouldn't do that here. This is not the place for that. Okay. I think that everywhere else is the place for that. To be clear, I think everywhere else is the place for that argument, just not here. I think that a healthy discussion on that is a very, very good thing. Mr. Wayne had to interject there. He had a strong opinion he wanted to share. Actually, he wasn't. It was a commentary on having strong opinions. Yeah, but I really think I'm excited to see that someone has an opinion here. I'm not going to say whether or not I agree with that opinion or anything, but I think it's cool that we have some feelings about this stuff. Hopefully, you guys will look closely at the way you feel on this. We go back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the general will, the social contract. Rousseau and a lot of the other philosophers said that all men have an equal right to their natural rights, that all men deserve natural rights, and that they're born with those. But some of them, like Rousseau, specifically pointed out that that does not necessarily include women. Okay? According to Rousseau, a woman's place was to raise children and to make sure that her sons fought for their own natural rights. But they didn't leave a lot of room for women. Okay? It's at this point in my lecture that Mr. Wayne accuses me of being a feminist. But I think this is the place to be a little bit of a feminist. I'm probably not very good at it, but it's fair to say that in history books, women get forgotten. They're not treated very fairly. And I can prove that to you if we go back to the source material here. There is 1, 2, 3 paragraphs on the women of the Enlightenment, and there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages about the works of men during the Enlightenment. So yeah, maybe women aren't getting a fair shake on this. I don't know if it's this publisher's fault or if just historians did a bad job of writing down what happened. But we're going to talk about some of those women philosophers now, those women philosophes. Okay? In our notes, I really just left down some room for the names and the ideas. These are women who challenged the philosophe. I'm not using pink for women. That feels wrong. I'm not okay with that. They don't deserve to be colored pink just because they're women. Okay, women who challenged the philosophe. Okay, some names. There was a woman named D'Estelle. Good luck finding that umlaut, Mr. Wayne. D'Estelle. There was a woman named Macaulay. And there was a woman named Wollstonecraft, who we've already spoken about, if you remember. I'd like to point out that in Wollstonecraft's writing, she directly addressed Jean-Jacques Rousseau. She directly addressed Rousseau and pointed out that he and other philosophers were being hypocrites. Because what they fought for, what they argued for, was equality for women. But I'm going to say equality for everyone, because that includes women. They believe that women are also born with natural rights, that no one can take a woman's life, no one can take a woman's liberty, and no one can take a woman's property or prevent her from getting property and still pretend like they believe in natural rights. Okay, so these women were among those. There were many others. They're not very well documented because historians, again, aren't fair to women all the time. Sometimes they're fair. There were many others that argued that all of this stuff applies for women as well. Okay, the thing is, Wollstonecraft, being an early feminist, even she had some maybe unfair ideas, okay, because we'll talk about this. Wollstonecraft was a well-known British social critic. She accepted, or believed, she believed that a woman's first duty was to be a good mother, but that a woman should be able to decide what was in her own interest without depending on her husband. So even she decided that a woman's job was to be a mother. That may or may not be true, okay? There are women, I know women, I have some loved ones who are women whose job is not to be a mother. They can't be a mother. So maybe even this early feminist didn't understand how much of rights she deserved. I don't know. But we can see here that we have some early ideas about the idea that women are people too. If they make up half of society, I mean, just by the numbers, just scientifically, if you count them, half of people are women. That, you know, they have natural rights just like I do, just like men do. Okay, and I think that the history book only gives us 4 paragraphs to talk about that, but you'll hear me rant about it a little more later. Okay. The French thinkers who talked about government and society and the shape of society, they called themselves philosophes. Okay? But later, there was a different group of thinkers who spent more time talking about the economy and trade. Okay? And they called themselves physiocrats. Philosophes were one group of people thinking about one kind of thing. Physiocrats were another group of people talking about the economy. I'm not going to give you guys another term because it's not worth defining that. But in the writing here, it calls them that, so I wanted to clear that up. Like philosophes, these physiocrats based their thinking on natural laws. They claimed that their rational economic system was based on the natural laws of economics. Physiocrats rejected mercantilism, where the government regulated the economy, and instead urged a policy of laissez-faire, or laissez-faire, some people say. Among them was Adam Smith. Laissez-faire. This is a French term. It means leave it alone. Let it fall. Let it be. Leave it be. Laissez-faire. Scottish economist Adam Smith admired the physiocrats. In his work, The Wealth of Nations, he argued that a free market should be allowed to regulate business activities. He tried to show how linking supply and demand will give us all of the controls over the economy that we need. In other words, he said that we should have laissez-faire, or let it be economics. He didn't actually coin this term. This is an earlier term from the French physiocrats, but he outlined it and explained basically government should not interfere with business. It should just stay out of business's business. That the businesses should operate with little government influence. Now, this goes against what Rousseau was saying earlier. Rousseau was saying, well, it's not fair that so many people have so much property and others have very little, and that it's the job of society to make laws to keep that from happening. Smith said, no. We need to make it so that people are free to do what they want to get what they need. And so here we see these two butting of the heads, right? How strong does the government need to be on choosing winners in the economy? Adam Smith had one idea, Rousseau had another, and we're going to see this argued about later in this history class, and probably forever and ever and ever, because we certainly have different ideas about this in American politics today. Okay, I could go on and explain how Trump feels about this, how Biden feels about this, and to try to show you guys where this breaks down. Okay, but capitalism and socialism, both of those ideas come directly from these arguments that happened way earlier, and we're still hashing these out today. Okay. Does anyone have any questions over this reading section? I'd like to make sure we iron those out. Did anyone have any comments? Did anyone want to say something really stupid about feminism? That'd be cool. I could argue with you. I shouldn't argue with you. You guys are teenagers. But this is what these guys thought, and this is where these ideas came from. I'm going to leave these notes up for another minute or so and let you guys copy them down. If you guys need them, they are in the reading that I posted for you. I gave you guys 2 days to do that. So between those 2 days of doing this reading and today's lecture over this reading, where I gave you the answers, I believe you should be women make bad sandwiches. That's okay. Yeah, thanks for that. Between those 2 days of working on this and today's lecture with me giving you the answers, I think you guys should be pretty well prepared for tomorrow's quiz on this. Okay. I'm going to stop my screen share here pretty soon, and I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Wayne. When Mr. Wayne is done, I'll go back over the science stuff that we're going to get into today. It's not a lecture like this, and we'll go from there. Okay. Let me figure out how to stop the recording here. Excuse me. Thanks, guys.